I think this is our second presentation to you about the blended learning process. I'm very excited this time because we are a few months into it now. We started at the beginning of this year. In fact, we actually started the planning process last spring, but as you say, the rubber hit the road this fall with 6 of our classrooms, and 3 of those teachers are here with me today, and I will introduce them in just a little bit. So to just get started for everybody else in the audience who may not know what blended learning is when we use the term blended learning, according to Wikipedia, blended learning is a formal education program in which a student learns at least in part through online delivery of content and instruction with some element of student control over time, place, path, or place. And that's a quote from Wikipedia. Basically what that means is part of the instruction is delivered in a face-to-face medium from a teacher in a classroom setting. Part of it is delivered through a computer, whether it's a program or it's instruction or content that's designed online. Most often you've heard, it's caught a lot of attention lately, is the flipped classroom, flipped instruction. And that's one style of blended learning, just one style. And in that case, it's one where students actually will go home or somewhere where the teacher isn't, learn about the content that they then come back to the teacher who then reinforces and covers the gaps. It's a different style of instruction, but there are other methods to blended learning, for example, rotational models, flex models, and basically what our pilot's doing this year is we're trying to prepare for the tech levy that is coming up in 2014, February of 2014. What do we do once we're able to make a technology-rich classroom? Do we just hand it to the students and say, teachers, you're on your own? That doesn't work. We have to prepare for how we change the instruction that goes on in the classroom to account for this technology-rich environment by changing instruction to take advantage of the way students want to learn. And we believe that best method is through some sort of a blended learning practice. So we picked 3 schools, Spanaway Elementary, Spanaway Middle, and Spanaway Lake High School, to participate in this pilot. We kicked off last spring. We had some planning meetings with the leadership teams. We brought in a guest speaker, very motivational. It was great. And what we did at that point in time is we started to accept individual proposals from teachers within those schools. And at the time, we had enough equipment to outfit 6 classrooms. And from those schools, we picked 2 teachers at each, and we said, let's come together in the fall. Let's talk about how we can distribute this equipment to you and what you're going to try. Being a pilot, this has to work from day one. It's take a blended learning model, something that you've researched on your own, something you're very interested in, and let's see if it works. Does it work for Bethel? Does it work for your students? If it doesn't, let's try something different. This is a chance for us to prepare for the passage of this levy so that we don't have to do this once the equipment's all there for everybody else. We'll get the experimentation out of the way and get some solid practices down before that. So the 6 teachers that we selected for the fall pilot, Jared Erickson, who is with us here, Alan Pankow, also at Spanaway Lake, Laura Handy here, from Spanaway Middle, Kim Moline, Lois Trapp, George Gillespie, and Charity Stern. We actually did 7. Because I say that because there's an asterisk on Charity. Spanaway Elementary chose to supplement their pilot with their own equipment, so they could bring an additional classroom into the mix. And Nikki Mesa is here with us today. She is George Gillespie's teaching partner. And on top of selecting another classroom to put into the pilot, they added enough of their own technology to bring their teaching partners in. So in fact, Spanaway Elementary had in the fall 6 classrooms as part of their pilot instead of just 2. So it was an investment of their own technology that they purchased over time, plus the stuff that we gave them. This winter, we expanded our pilot to another, it says 6, but it's actually 8 classrooms. Joanne Parr at Spanaway Lake, Caitlin Elford at Spanaway Lake, who is Jared's teaching partner. Scott Birdseye at Spanaway Middle, Melissa Munson-Merritt at Spanaway Middle, Marianne Floyd at Spanaway Middle, and Jennifer Bonner at Spanaway Middle. And what we actually intentionally did there was we covered the 7th, is that 7th grade?
You covered 6th
Sixth.
in that spread.
Yeah, it's quite the gamut, but we actually covered 6th grade, I believe, pretty heavily. Yes.
Yeah, and you covered all those core content areas.
Yeah. And then finally, we brought in Dina Camerano and Camilla Fredrickson in 1st and 2nd grade for that primary experience. And with that, it came technology equipment for a simulated one-to-one, or in the case of Spanaway Elementary, a rotational model that was more like a 3-to-1 students to technology. So here's the current pilot scope that we're looking at the 3 schools. Just kind of a recap of what I just said, so if you want to take a look at that real quick, that's fine. And like I said, Spanaway all supplements with their own equipment to expand their pilot further than what we're able to provide. Currently, in our pilot, we have sets of iPads, we have sets of iPad minis, we have Chromebooks, we have MacBooks, and coming shortly are PC tablets. We're trying everything. It's important that we try everything right now, get a student opinion of what works, get the teacher's opinion of what's manageable and what works for them. And what we're doing with this stuff, and Jared's kind of been our guinea pig on this, we keep changing it on them. We keep taking the equipment that they get comfortable with and move it somewhere else and give them something different. Because we really want to know their students' opinion on what each device is like, how it works for what they're trying to accomplish in their classroom, as well as the teacher's opinion. So I would like to hand it off right now to our classroom teachers that are with us. I'll go first with Nikki, who sorry, didn't fix your name on there, with 4th grade at Spanaway Elementary.
So at Spanaway Elementary, we're currently, right now, my ratio to technology to students is about 2-to-1. We've had the ability to use Chromebooks, which we started with. Now we're currently using laptops. I also have 2 desktops in my classroom, as well as an iPad and my teacher laptop. So at this time, most of the classrooms, if not all, are running on a rotational model. What that looks like in our classroom is that we have 3 rotations running. One with the teacher, which provides direct instruction based off student need. One on the computer in small groups, and one that's doing a project-based activity, whether that's reinforcing the skill using our curriculum independently, or if it's actually something that they're doing, making, or demonstrating for the class. Excuse me. The best part about the rotational model is really being able to look at our data and provide ability grouping to meet the needs of all learners. Also, it gives us as the teachers the ability to really know our students inside and out, learning capabilities as well as personality styles and learning methods to meet their needs. A lot of the small group instruction is more hands-on, so we're using models, using manipulatives, and using the resources available to us to make sure that we are meeting those needs. And with the computer-based programs, we are supplementing with Dreambox. Is a huge one that we're currently using in math.
Do you want to explain Dreambox real quick?
Sorry. Let me get there. So one thing that's really came from the integration of technology is increased student engagement. It's amazing how excited our students are to learn. Not only with the use of the technology, but also in the rotation of coming to us and getting that one-on-one time. So every student in our classroom really gets that voice and that attention from their teacher. With that, the responsibility of taking care of their technology. Half of our students, around about, have technology at home, so they're used to using those resources, and then half don't. So it's provided us with the opportunity to, I guess, brighten their world. They get to now make those connections with other students who are using those technology pieces, and they also get to learn for the 21st century. As they look across the room, all of our board members are using technology. I'm sure most of us in the audience have cell phones or other devices that we're currently checking. So it's something that actually makes them more aware, and as they're entering the world, it makes them understand and see how it's all connected. Some of the programs that we use is Dreambox, which Mark referenced. Spanaway Elementary, currently 3 through 5th grade, are all working on a math program that's designed to provide individualized lessons per student. They take a pre-test prior. Within this pre-test, it gives us a report, and it actually backtracks any holes they have in their instruction, all the way down to 1st grade. This is like a stimulated video game that all students get to play. So it's really exciting for them. It provides a creativity that I can't generate in the classroom. It's very visually appealing, and so when they're actually learning, they're having so much fun that they want to tell you that they got to play this game or got this award. But really what they're doing is multi-digit multiplication or subtracting with borrowing, which may be a skill that they're struggling with, but all of a sudden it's now exciting and fun. And in the rotational model, most students, if not all, are getting anywhere from 20 minutes to 30 minutes on that program a day. Within this program, they also get a printout that they can go home and work on it at home on their own devices. So it's something that is continually being used. It is also, some of my kids say, instead of doing this math page, can I do Dreambox for my homework tonight? And that's a fully acceptable option. But it also makes the learning in the household fun because they get to share that with their family and their siblings and parents. Other programs that we're currently using, Accelerated Reader, which is a program in which they read a story and then take a computerized test on, and they get a score based off of that. We do Read Naturally, which is a fluency program in which they get to, with a teacher or instructional assistant, they read aloud. They mark it, they get to practice the story, have the story read to them. They get to take little vocabulary game or play vocabulary games to increase the vocabulary in the passage. We have Read Theory, Extra Math, and Smartboard lessons that we incorporate into our instruction, whether in small group or whole group.
Vocabulary.
And Flocabulary, which is on there. Flocabulary is a program that some of the teachers have incorporated into their classroom. And what it does, it's raps. It's vocabulary, tier 2 vocabulary that most students may not have access to or have heard. And this is all presented in song and rap. So it's the best thing to see little 3rd graders or 4th graders. They're up there, they are singing, they are moving, they are dancing, and the whole time they're learning those words, which I believe I will have a picture of. That's one of the activities that we we'll do with the kids, and we'll start to say the beginning of the word, like if we're just reciting it, and all of a sudden they're singing it. So now it's incorporating those words and those songs into memory. Impact on teacher and student success. So as a teacher incorporating blended learning, it's changed the way that I provide instruction as well as how I plan for my lessons, because now I have a whole World Wide Web available to me. I can pull lessons off the internet. I can pull activities or games that have been proven to be educationally sound for my kids. What I do is I link them to a Google document that all students have access through my Bethel, so they can get from home. They log in, they hit that link, and it takes them to whatever website we're currently working on. Within those websites, I can provide individualized instruction. So my whole planning and outlook on how I'm servicing my students change with the incorporation of this technology. It also provides, of course, multiple methods for delivery, through songs, through just someone else reading it too. If there's multiple programs where the books can actually be read to them and then they get to read. But it gives them more than I can provide currently. Impact on students is student excitement, focus on learning. They want to learn now. Well, not that they didn't, but they're more excited to come in and learn because of the delivery of the instruction. Quick successes. They can, like when you take an AR test, you know your score immediately. You know that you're succeeding. Same thing with the Dreambox. When you pass a level, you get a little badge. And the best thing in the world is that kid that throws his hands up and, I got that badge, and now I get this game. So they're making those connections to the technology, their learning, and their success. We are seeing increased unit assessment scores in both math and reading, and we will be taking our MAPS assessment this week and next week, and we're hoping to be able to share those great results.
All right. Oh, yes.
Can I ask
yes.
a quick question on the rotational model? Out of those 3 groups, is there any one group that they seem to be more excited about or more interested in, or is it pretty balanced?
It's pretty balanced. I would say, depending on the unit, coming to me or coming to the teacher and the computer. If it's a worksheet or a page from a journal, they're not as equally excited because that conversation isn't there, and then the game, of course, attached to their learning is not there.
But one of the reasons that the rotational model is a very popular one with blended learning is, the way I've heard it described, is it extends the teacher's time with students. Because because Nikki's taking her class and breaking it into 3 groups, she's meeting with, what would it be?
Anywhere from 4 to
Yeah,
7 students at a time
Yeah.
for a 30-minute time block.
So it's very personal, as opposed to trying to teach and instruct the entire class at the same time. She's able to really target her instruction through those groups.
So has it made your life easier or harder?
It's a balance. Harder in some sense because of the fact that I have to really, oh gosh, this is going to make me sound horrible. But I really,
Does it increase your workload? Diminish
at first
the
it
amount
did,
of time? Okay.
but now no, it's diminished the workload. But at first it was a lot harder because I really had to look at the data and what my specific student needed. And when you have 27 students, it took me a long time to decide this child worked way better using these X, Y, and Z, and this child worked way better in this aspect. Because of now incorporating technology, I know what programs really excite the child and what programs they're like, I don't care, I'm just clicking. So in that aspect.
Oh, right. In any case, another benefit is the fact that student assessments for the state are all going to be done on a computer. So this is another reason we have to bring everybody. You might be asking, why do we have first and second and third graders? Because that's where we're going to have to go. They have to be ready and capable to do it. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, my name is Laura Handy, and I'm from Spanaway Middle School, and you'll have to excuse my voice. It's been a 4-week cold that hopefully I'll be over soon. But first of all, I want to thank you for selecting me for the pilot. I know it was a panel of people. I see a few of those people back here, and I know that there were some mystery people on the panel too. But we were given a form, and it was said, you know, you've learned about blended learning today over the last few days. We've asked you to do some reading, and I actually contacted Mark very early on before the pilot even started and said, hey, I want to do this. What can we do? And Mark, I'm a little nervous. And Mark was like, just calm down. Just hang tight. I'll get back to you in a couple of weeks. And I didn't know at that point that we were moving in this direction. So I feel very fortunate to be chosen. I, on my form, handed in, there was like all these nice, neat questions. And they said, what would your exact plan be? And I kind of crossed the form out and flipped it over and drew a web. And the reason I drew a web is because I am a project-based teacher. I use project-based methods in my classroom every single day. And it's not super linear. It kind of ebbs and flows depending on the unit and the content area. So my approach to this has been a little bit different. I have taken the technology, and instead of changing the way I teach, I've modified the technology to fit into the way my students are already learning because it works for me and it works for them. Now that's not to say I haven't made any changes, but it was an easy transition for me, easier than I think probably some other people. So tonight I'm going to talk about my approach a little bit. I'm going to talk about the learning piece, so what the students are actually doing, and then I'm going to talk about what I have seen in my classroom. So again, it's a project-based learning approach, which means students usually tackle problems or big ideas, sometimes a little bit backwards. There's always usually a big culminating thing at the end. Sometimes it's a test, but more frequently it's something like a research project, some kind of creative project, or maybe some quizzing too. So it looks very different depending on the unit. And I teach English and history combined classes, and they're about 2 hours apiece, and I teach one 8th grade class that runs about 50 minutes. I've taken most of my teacher paperwork and converted it to Google Docs, so anymore if I'm going to create something, I don't do it in Word anymore. I usually create it straight in Google Docs. I can go back and just reference my units very easily, and it won't create more work for me. I can simply just pull it back up again, and I don't have to hunt for it because it's all web-based. Student paperwork to digital docs. My students do submit a lot of their work, not all of it, digitally through either Google Docs, Google Spreadsheets, via other means, sometimes via video or voice recordings. They also often are given the choice whether they choose paper or digital. The majority of the time they will choose digital over paper. They're just more comfortable with it at this point. I've had to redefine creativity. I'm big into letting students draw and create and make timelines and show that they're learning in creative ways, and I've had to redefine that. So what does digital art look like? How is it artistic to copy and paste a picture? Is it artistic? I've used Google Draw and a couple other mediums to try to transition into that technology piece and combine it with actual physical art. Student-teacher communication and home access. My communication with my students has increased. Now, my dad would tell you that communication has decreased since people have started using cell phones so frequently. I would argue that that's not true, because students who would not have approached me before now send me emails. They comment on their documents, and I receive an email saying that they've commented or asked a question. Students will frequently contact me at 6 or 7 o'clock at night via email to ask questions about their homework, so I know they're working on it, even if they're struggling. So I would tell you that my communication with my students has become more honest, and it has increased over time. And especially as students are remembering how to access me, it's becoming more and more and more, which I think is super awesome. And then home access, parents also have more access to me, and they're kind of jumping on board with how I expect students to communicate. And then finally, increased access to learning. All of my units, my documents, and the majority of my assignments are available to students online via Moodle. I create links. I give them access to the documents at any time, so that if they don't finish at class and they have technology at home, they can use it. Some of them use it from Boys and Girls Club or the library. So their access is increasing, and also the accountability, because they can't say, well, I don't remember what I was supposed to do, because then I say, do you have internet access at home at night? Yes, I do. Well, then you know where to find it. And when I check with the parent always says, yes, of course they could check it at home. So the accountability piece has also increased. Can we go to the next? I just said this. All right, the skills. Students are using Chromebooks and MacBooks. We are now onto the Chromebooks, which I prefer for middle level. They're lighter, they're smaller, they're less scary for me because they cost less money if a student breaks them. But I prefer the Chromebooks. I like that they're all online, so you can't save something to the actual computer, because students say, no, I saved it on computer number 10. No, you didn't, because it's in your doc. So it's nice not to have to deal with those issues. Students use docs forms. I've really utilized the things that are available to us currently. I have sought out some other resources, but primarily my goal was to take what Bethel School District has available right now for students and implement it to the best of its abilities. Internet search skills, there's a whole list of things. You can read them for yourself. I do want to point out, though, that one of my big focus is upper level formatting and editing, web-based sharing and editing, digital editing and communicating. There's a lot of things that are going on that are back and forth amongst students and staff that is helping the quality of work come in at a much higher level. There's something about the professionalism of a piece of work that comes in typed as opposed to handwritten, and the students notice the difference in that as well. It's not just me. All right, and then the results. This is the part that I really care about. So I kind of broke it down into two parts. The improved student part, what am I noticing from them? What am I seeing from my students? And then what also has increased that maybe isn't so much to do with the students. So the first part is professionalism. When they walk in the door and I hand them a Chromebook, there's something professional about saying, log onto your docs, you're going to submit this to me, and it's in a very professional feeling environment. Now, I say this keeping in mind that the majority of my students are 12 to 14, but they do take it much more seriously because we are trusting them to use these things in a responsible way, and the work ethic has increased as well. Engagement has increased, which is probably why the work ethic has increased. I'm able to keep them working for longer periods of time with higher quality of work. And the other thing that has worked well for middle school, and anybody who has middle school kids or spends time with them knows that classwork is not important, but their friends are very important. So it's been nice because we've been able to do some things where they can comment with their peers and do some live sharing of docs that increase the socialization in a way that's not distracting to others, like yelling across the room is. Turn-in rate has increased simply because I can get on and I literally will pull up my thing and say, okay, I have docs from da-da-da-da-da-da, where's the rest of them? And they go, oh, I forgot to share, I'm almost done. So it's easier for me to hold them accountable because I can pull their document up at any time and look at where they're at. I'll frequently pull them up while they're working and make comments as they work so that they're aware that I'm checking their work, and I will give them feedback to, I notice you're not capitalizing proper nouns, please fix that. And then they message back, okay, thanks. So that's been really nice. Again, that little communication piece that really does bump up that amount of learning and rigor. And then I have seen an increase of grades. In the scores that they're earning are much higher. So a paper that may have received a C for a student, they're now receiving higher grades, one, because they're taking it seriously, and two, it's much easier to edit a document that you've created in a typed format than go back and re-handwrite an essay that took you an hour to write in hand. So the editing process is so much easier. And they're getting more valuable feedback from their peers because of that. And then also an increase in learning. I'm noticing, and I don't know if it's a result of the language that I'm using in my classroom or if it's a result of what students are doing and retaining as a result of the technology, but I'm noticing that their professional language is increasing, and that when I'm using things like MLA formatting, did you hit your expectation or your target or your goal? Ladies and gentlemen, we were looking at Common Core Standard 1.1. Have you addressed that in your paper today? They know what those things are, and they're able to connect that in a way that they weren't able to do before. There's just a level of sharpness that I can't attribute it to one thing or another. I don't know if it's me, them, or the tech, or all of it together, but something interesting is happening there that I don't think you can put data on. And then what I'm seeing increased alignment with Common Core standards. As you know, Common Core standards require students to increase their use of technology. They also require them to apply their learning in different ways. That's much easier to do if they can word process. Again, it goes back to that editing component. The rigor has increased. My expectations of them are higher. Not that they were low before, but it's just much easier to require the editing and those types of things if it's easier for them to do that. College connections, one of the things I frequently say with my 8th graders is you already know how to do this. We're at a practicing level, and your college professors will expect to see this, and my expectation is no different. And using that language with them and handing them the technology that matches what I expect of them has really increased how they view their learning. And then real life application, of course. Eventually they're going to expect to be very proficient using these types of technology. So it doesn't hurt to give them that jump start now. And that was a lot, and that is all I have for you.
It was great to see your first 2 terms up there. That's not something you normally associate, in a learning environment, professionalism and work ethic.
Work ethic should be.
It should be.
It's a big problem. So I've been thankful to have the technology to address that.
You did quite well for being nervous.
Oh, thanks. Well, once I get rolling, we just keep going. Breathe. I'm good. This is how I teach too, so you can imagine my students like.
All right, I'm Jared Erickson from Spanaway Lake High School, and I'll try not to repeat too much of what they've already said and offer some fresh perspectives from the high school. I implemented flipped instruction in 2 different courses. One was my advanced placement government and politics class. The other was my Washington State history class, which is at the high school level is kind of a credit retrieval option for students who have either come in from out of state or perhaps failed in the 7th grade. So what I wanted to do was kind of bookend the pilot on those 2 ends of the spectrum, both high achieving students and students who are struggling. So to see the results of what that would be like at both those levels. Before I get to this, a couple of mistakes that I made. I made 2 important mistakes when I first started with blended learning. First, I talked to students like they were a room full of adults when I introduced technology. I said, okay, here's the iPad, this is the home button, and they're like, okay, come on, really? Come on, let's go. That's easy stuff. Yeah, we know how to do that, Mr. Erickson, thank you. Okay. The second mistake I made was the assumption that students would instantly, out of the gate, be able to use technology for learning, and that's something that some students certainly can do, but for the most part we have to teach, and that was a big learning experience for me, is that students are very good at using technology for the things they enjoy doing, watching videos, social media, things like that, but not necessarily when you direct them to do an academic task. So those were 2 aha moments. So I implemented a flip model. It's kind of a hybrid flip model, actually. That still involves direct instruction. Okay, so I think Mark touched on this. That the backbone of blended learning is still good teaching. This is not going to replace teachers. It's not going to threaten the profession. If anything, it enhances it because it does require still very strong teaching. There is some teacher-produced content I implemented, both content that I made, small YouTube videos, instructional YouTube videos, or videos or other content that other teachers I had found out there had made. And then placing that in a format that's on demand for students. They can access that 24 hours a day. So if they're at home doing their homework, it doesn't matter if they're doing their homework right after school or at 10:30 at night, they can access instructional content when they are ready for it. And if they need a refresher, they can go back and look at it again. In fact, just now we're doing a little bit of review for the AP exam and reviewing for our finals. And I've asked students to go back and say, okay, look at the videos that we posted on our class website and look at to kind of review those concepts. It's a really flexible pedagogy too, because on some days I'll teach using a traditional model, and we may not use the technology. Most days we do, but some days we won't, simply because it doesn't require it. It gives more time for projects, like Mark was talking about. When we push that basic instruction online and at the student's convenience on demand, that then leaves us more time in class for the projects, hands-on learning, engaging, things like that. And then finally, when students are able to produce the content themselves, that's when I think they get the most results out of it. They get the most engaging learning when, instead of just maybe listening to me or listening to what I put on there, when they can produce the content is especially powerful. So my colleagues here have kind of already touched on this, but some of the applications that are out there and available for students to use allow us as teachers to gather very quick formative data. So we can quickly give a quiz at the beginning of the class and have the application grade it for us instantly. And instantly, based on the data that produces, maybe then assign students into ability groups instead of maybe setting aside and sorting the quizzes and grading them, and then the next day assigning ability groups. We can assign ability groups right then and there. And like it says, it gives the students instant feedback as well, because they can go through, and as they take a quiz, it tells them, got that answer right? Nope, sorry, I got that answer wrong. And then gives us lots of different instructional options in terms of maybe using that traditional reteaching. Okay, that's the thing I found, is that over and over again, like I said earlier, this is the backbone of blended learning is good. It's fundamentally good teaching. Putting them in learning groups, and then also when they have to produce content, they can produce content for whatever their learning style is. So if I give a project, they can produce a poster using their iPad or their Chromebook. They can produce a podcast. They can produce a video. They can produce an essay if they chose to write an essay. Just any number of different products they can do just based on their learning style. And then finally, I want everybody to look at that picture. And I chose that picture because, as you can see, every single head is looking down. And that is a fundamental paradigm shift for me. And the thing that was the most difficult to get used to is when you're teaching students, having them not look at you. Because if you spend any time in the classroom, you know what they're supposed to be doing is what you guys are doing right now, looking at me. But when they're all looking down, you're thinking, wait a second, they're not paying attention. But they are. They're engaged. Those students are engaged. I'm in the middle of teaching there, and they're engaged on their device. So it's a total paradigm shift. It's an amazing experience. It refreshes teaching. I was just telling somebody today that this came along right at the right time, because I was starting to feel stale in my profession, and this kind of like re-energized it. And I felt like it takes all of those things that maybe I felt like I was good at and just breathes new life into them. What I saw initially, I took some of my original the test scores from the previous year and compared them to the test scores that I got after my first unit in blended learning, and saw increased test scores, increased student engagement. My colleagues talked about how we'll get some students now that will engage and participate maybe in digital discussions that maybe wouldn't normally participate. And as far as student feedback, I've surveyed my students. Students, of course, love blended learning. They love flipped instruction. They love having the technology. But what was really surprising to me is when I gave them the option in the survey, I said, would you rather do this all the time or just some of the time? They still want traditional teaching. So traditional teaching is the backbone. They still want the traditional teaching. They still want us to give good old-fashioned instruction the way we used to, okay, just with this blended approach. So that.
So next steps, I'll go quick. Next steps, kind of what Jared alluded to, staff and student surveys. We need to find out what their experience is like. Again, this is a pilot so that we can gather information about how do we move forward with our technology levy. So that's why we're rotating equipment through all of them, forcing them to change, because when I went to Jared after the first rotation of equipment and he had Chromebooks, he said, I don't want anything else. And I said, well, you're getting iPads. So we need to know, your students are the most valuable people right now for us to tell us the differences between the devices as to which has better merits than the other for the different types of project that you're doing. And we're also doing anecdotal interaction with the students and staff. And Laura and Jared know this very well. A few of us have breezed into their classrooms and they've stopped teaching so we can talk to their students. It's not just a survey that they provide feedback, digitally, but we actually have conversations with them as a whole class. What do you like? What don't you like? What do you want? What would you like to see? Obviously, it's not definitive or research-based, but it's a conversation we can have with students to figure out what's going to best meet their needs because they're an important voice in this. They're the ones that are going to be using this technology with the teachers. So finally, we're going to expand our pilot a little bit more. We're going to keep working with the 3 schools, and I think we're going to maybe even expand outside of the 3 schools a bit to some more classrooms. We'll be looking at individual proposals still to expand to those additional sites. We do weekly meetings with our blended learning teachers now, and I would almost call it a support group because, as they can tell you, the first 3 meetings was simply, what's working for you? What are you doing? I mean, and they shared little management techniques that just blew our minds. And then again, we're going to keep rotating that equipment through the classrooms. We're going to evaluate where are we doing well, what models of blended learning are working for our classrooms at what level. And finally, we implement. We do a lot of professional development in that lead time before we purchase the equipment and start a distribution to get our teachers ready. That's very important. And that's what this whole pilot is about, is how do we change instruction, not just for these teachers, but across the district. So I know it went really long, I'm sorry, but thank you for your time and any questions for them.
This is really important then, and I first of all
let you
want
guys
to thank
do it.
all 3 of you and the other teachers who are not here tonight for being leaders in this attempt to figure out a way to really improve learning opportunities for our students. And I'm sure probably not feeling like pioneers, leaders, sometimes guinea pigs, but sincerely appreciate your willingness to step to the plate and do something kind of scary in some ways. Let me ask you a couple questions. I think I heard some of the answers along the way, but there's a learning curve to this, right? Okay. And do you feel like you've gotten kind of under control as to where that learning curve is and start to feel kind of comfortable?
Yes.
Would you go back to the old way of teaching?
Never.
No.
Never.
I would hope not to.
And you really are seeing what you believe, and we'll have a chance to statistically look at this with the MAPS test coming up, but you really do believe that it's really improving student learning.
Yeah.
Yes.
And how long did that take? 5, 6 months?
Well, how long have we been doing this now?
Since fall. I mean, we started in September.
I had my the MacBooks.
Laura had a bit of advantage, and she alluded to this briefly. Laura and I have known each other for a long time. She called me last year in the spring with just a few weeks to go in school. And I don't know any teacher that does that. You want to try something different with a few weeks to go in school. And she said,
I was at burnout. I needed something new.
and she said, hey, I want to.
Bored easily.
She said, hey, I want to try this flipped instruction thing. I want to try this flipped teaching or flipped classroom. And I said, wow, we've just been talking about blended learning. Well, what's that? That's flipped instruction. And at that time, we had 1 Chromebook cart in the district. We now have over 1,000 Chromebooks in the district. And I said, hey, Laura, try it. Let's do it. I sent Tanya Nairmore, who you've all met, one of our teachers on special assignment, and she spent time with Laura the last 3 days of school flipping instruction. The last 3 days to the very end. And it couldn't have been timed better. I mean, it was just, the phone call was great. Thanks. So,
Thank you.
yeah, it's been great. But other than that, our pilot folks, other than the meetings we've had, have not actually been implementing with students until the fall of this year moving forward.
You 3 and the other teachers involved are obviously fast learners, is the term I would use. People who want to embrace this. What do we need to do? And you touched on it, the professional development. But I mean, you know those people, like your dad,
Yes, I
that
do.
don't embrace technology, that are in the teaching profession. So how do we get them to embrace this and get the same results?
Well, we have teachers in our building that have been teaching for multiples of years that maybe are not as tech savvy as a new teacher coming in or having 10 years experience. and I know Mark can tell the story, but
Go
she
ahead.
has fully embraced this. And even though it's one of those things that she may not have her life experience centered around, it is something that she is fully on board with and implementing within her classroom. So I think, like Jared kind of alluded to and Laura about burnout, sometimes you need to breathe something into the passion that you already have to make it so that you remember why you love what you do. And this provides that opportunity for those teachers who have been teaching a long time and may feel that way.
With the internet, you're unlimited now.
Yes.
Well, in this case, the teacher,
Your
she's,
imagination is what limited.
Right, and the other piece to that too is that there's an entire network of teachers out there nationwide, worldwide, who are doing this, that are just a mouse click away, that are a support
They've
group.
got
that are-
content already online
Yeah.
that's usable as well.
I mean, just for instance, every Sunday night at 6 o'clock, there's a group of high school government teachers that have an online share. They just share ideas, and you know, I've put some things I've done up there, and I've got ideas from them, and it's great. And these are teachers in like Pennsylvania, Florida, and California that I would normally never have met. But because of that, my students are getting better instruction because of that.
Can I add a piece to that? And this isn't a solution to that, because I think that is going to be a challenge no matter what, but I think one of the purposes of this pilot is you are going to have people who do feel comfortable and know what's going on. There are teachers who are very tech savvy and who feel very comfortable. I would say that I'm very comfortable with technology. I don't always know how to use it, but I always feel like if I mess up, you can undo anything. So it doesn't intimidate me like it would somebody else. I think the challenge is going to be is, one, what is the expectation of implementation? And two, this is going to be a very difficult thing to implement if we're strictly textbook based. So the question becomes, how do we integrate our required text and the things that we want to make sure students are learning with the technology component? And I can tell you that is going to be the challenge, especially for teachers who are not comfortable with the technology. It's scary to give up that textbook and to try new things when that has traditionally worked for you in the past. So.
Well, and I think the fact too, that this is not gonna be pass the levy and hand out computers to
Right.
every student. This is gonna be a multi-year
Phase in.
endeavor,
Yep.
gradual implementation with a lot of professional development, giving those people the support that they need to feel comfortable to do what you need.
and a lot of, quite honestly, a lot of adjustment along the way. I mean, we're going to be tweaking, every year after we do a deployment. I mean, the pilot's great. We have, 16 classrooms going right now. But that's nothing compared to a fourth of our classrooms after the first year of deployment. Now we're going to make some real changes based on what we see. And part of that, and to address your question about some of the teachers who are hesitant, that's part of our pilot selection too. Nikki was referring to a particular teacher who was very hesitant and took the first step. She didn't know much about technology, but her response was, I have to learn. I have to be on board. These people will help me. And we do. And those support meetings that we did, the very first one that she stayed behind the meeting, and how long has she been teaching in the district? Like 30 years maybe? Close to? She said, that's the best meeting I've ever been to in the district. And there was no agenda. All it was our pilot teachers just talking about what's working, what management techniques. It's exactly what she needed. She didn't add anything to the meeting. She just sat and absorbed and left inspired. It was, I think, a watershed moment for her to move forward with the technology in her classroom. And we learned about the SAMR model when we were at Apple. And I would say that she's probably still at that augment level, which is not, that getting close to the redefining piece yet, but that's what's necessary. We have to be willing. We know that there are some people who are going to just fly to the top. And we know there's going to be some people that have to take slow, deliberate steps forward, but they'll get there. And we need to work together with our professional development and within their own departments, their schools, and their teams to bring everybody forward together.
And the other plus side of that, it could bring teachers and students closer because, as you said, you don't have to show them where the on button is.
Yeah.
So the teacher has a problem, they can get help from the classroom.
I was in Jared's classroom and I was watching a student move between apps on the iPad, and he was pressing the home button and then going and selecting the app, and I thought I was so clever, and I leaned over and I said, you can just double click the button. and you can just quickly switch between the apps. And he looked at me like I was an idiot, first of all. And he goes, yeah, I don't know. That was just really stupid. We know how to do that, thanks. I was like, oh, I'm sorry.
And I can speak for my students who now are teaching me the tricks because they've had the opportunity to explore. One of the programs we use is Dreambox. Obviously, no calculator allowed. And on our laptops, there's a way to switch screens where you can get the calculator. And I came around the corner and I was like, oh, what badge are you on? And I was like, where did you get that calculator? And they actually showed me because I didn't know that that was capable. And so then we had to have the talk about no, calculators are allowed. But they're figuring this out, and the best thing for them is to say, hey, I can show you how to do this. And we take that with us.
Good.
Again, I want to thank Jared and Laura and Nikki
But-
for being experimenters and leaders in this effort. I'm sorry, didn't mean to cut you off.
Oh, that's okay. Just before you go, do you have a feel for how many students have access or don't have access to the internet in their homes? Do you have a feel for that?
We were actually just talking about that in one of our tech committee meetings today about running a student survey, parent-student survey about Bethel specifically and what kind of internet access are in the homes right now.
I surveyed my students. I
Oh,
can
go ahead.
respond
Sorry.
specifically. No, that's okay. So 10% of my students have no access whatsoever. 10% have access via their parent's cell phone. Another roughly, there was like a little gray area in the data that I collected, but another 15% only have access via their own small device, which would be like a cell phone or an iPad or an iPad mini. And then roughly 70 to 75% had full-on access via a computer. And the reason that I separated out those questions was because for me as a humanities teacher, it's really important for them to be able to actually use a keypad of some sort to be able to write research papers and things of that nature. And I was finding I was getting a lot with errors, and it was kids that were punching them in on cell phones at home at night. So that's why I asked that question.
And I would suggest too that geographically, there are pockets where that varies.
Absolutely.
Depending on where the children live. And so those children that are in those areas where geographically and the income level there may not have even some of the stuff that you're talking about, but still we want to make sure that those kids have access to technology, and as we're going through this process, how do we get that into their homes and those types of things. And we went and visited some schools in California where they're doing those kinds of things. But we're not quite there yet, but it's just something that we certainly need to be aware of, the diversity of the social economic status in the district. Because
Right.
we're
And a big-
responsible for all of these.
Well, and geographically, I mean, is there even wire to their home?
Exactly.
You know,
Okay, that's another one.
But part of that is the device selection committee that we have right now is how do we pick a device that you can still operate and be productive with without internet? That's a big piece.
I think too, another aha moment to speak to your question too is, while, most students are, I would say 99% get the intuitive nature of technology and know how to work it. I've definitely seen those students in my class who, this is the first iPad they've held. This is the first piece of technology like that they've held. And they know how to use it probably still better than I do, but you can tell that this is, kind of an equalizing experience
Yeah.
compared to other
Absolutely.
students who maybe have had those pieces of technology before.
It's amazing.
That was outstanding, it really was.
Good job. Good job. Excellent.